It is finally happening. Our courageous Navy sailors are revolting against Donald Trump and his unlawful war. That's right. Our Navy sailors aboard those supercarriers in the Middle East have been telling their family members how atrocious their conditions are, how they hate being complicit in war crimes, how they fear they are going to die on these supercarriers. And these are carriers that have been out at sea on deployments for record-setting times as morale is at an all-time low.
And the news media just goes, well, it's very interesting. Apparently, they're going to be sending ICE out on Election Day. Not holy shit, what the fuck has happened to our country? Right. No one is pressing the alarm button. Nobody is breaking the glass in case of emergency. It is past time, America. And if my speaking out encourages anyone to speak out, to not be afraid of him, fear is a tool of fascism. And that's what he's using. Lies and fear. We're not wondering if fascism is arriving. Fascism has arrived, and it's here. That's when I read Project 2025, and I couldn't believe that it was published in a book that Americans could have bought and read, but they didn't. They didn't give it any attention, and everything that they proposed in that book has been done to a T. And the reason I left is I finished the whole book.
Hey everyone, I have a humble request from the bottom of my heart. If you believe in independent journalism, please consider joining our membership for just $9 a month. We are not backed by corporate money, we don't have powerful funders behind us, and we are trying to do the kind of work mainstream media often refuses to do. Our goal is to reach at least 1,000 members who can stand with us and help us keep exposing corruption, asking tough questions, and fighting for the truth. If you can afford it, please join our membership today. Your support can help us make this country better for all of us. Just $9 a month may not feel like a lot to many people, but for independent journalism, it can make a huge difference. It helps us continue our work without fear, without pressure, and without depending on corporate funding. So once again, if you believe in what we do, please join our membership. We need people like you to stand with us. We need at least 1,000 supporters who truly care about truth, accountability, and the future of this country. If you can, please become a member today and help us continue this fight. And even if you cannot join right now, you can still support us by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing our work with others. Every like, every comment, every subscription, and every membership helps us move one step closer to our goal.
20 years into the longest-running celebrity feud of Donald Trump's public life, Rosie O'Donnell just did something neither of them has ever quite done before. She's about to sit in Jimmy Kimmel's actual chair. On August 4th, 2026, appearing on Kara Swisher's podcast, On with Kara Swisher, O'Donnell delivered her bluntest assessment yet of the president's condition, saying flatly, "He's falling asleep. He's very physically ill. He doesn't look like he's long for this earth. He shouldn't be the man in control of the nuclear codes." 3 days later, Trump hit back the way he almost always does now, not with a statement, but with an AI-generated image. This one depicting O'Donnell in a mock medical office, receiving a fake diagnosis labeled Trump Derangement Syndrome Assessment, complete with invented symptoms like irrational rage and meltdown triggered by Trump news. That exchange alone would be enough to extend a feud that's already been running since 2006. But it landed just 2 weeks before something considerably bigger. Starting August 17th, O'Donnell takes over ABC's Jimmy Kimmel Live for 4 consecutive nights as guest host, her first appearance on the show in any capacity, while Kimmel takes a vacation. She's already teasing a comedic love song, imagining Trump as a secret admirer to open her first night, and ABC has already blocked one planned bit, a rewritten parody of If I Only Had a Brain, aimed at Trump, which the network cited political content, licensing concerns to keep off the air. 2 decades of mutual insults are about to collide with an actual national broadcast platform, live, for 4 straight nights. That collision is worth setting up carefully, because this piece covers ground the earlier chapters of this feud haven't touched. Prior installments of this story.
You see, this past week in San Diego at the Naval Air Station North Island, at an area in there called the Island Club, there were 200 family members who had family on the USS Abraham Lincoln, which has now been deployed for, as of that day, about 258 days, now about 262 days or so it's been deployed. Now, that deployment is very long, but then there was also the USS Gerald Ford that was deployed 326 days, and that left mid to late May from its deployment and came back. Then you had the George H.W. Bush, which has been deployed for about 108, 109 days or so. And because the U.S. has lost all control in the war and is unable to even guarantee its own safety, the George H.W. Bush supercarrier had to go down past the tip of Africa rather than go through the Red Sea because it feared that it would be hit by the Houthis. Isn't that a sign as well that the U.S. has completely lost the war? So you had these family members show up at the Island Club in San Diego on Thursday for an in-person meeting. You had the Acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Cao. You are, no wonder you've run out of munitions, right? Like, you've seen me do lots of coverage over the past several days about the munition issue, right? That the U.S. ran out of Patriot interceptors. It ran out of THAAD interceptors. We've run out of SM-2, 3, and 6, SM-6, anti-ballistics on the Navy destroyers. We don't have those. The ATACMS, the HIMARS, the offensive weapons, we ran out of those. The Arab nations that we supply these weapons to, they've pretty much run out of those as well. You have that. And now you have the issue on the ships, where morale's at an all-time low, where the sailors aren't even getting food. Think about that. And so I showed you what Hung Cao said there.
Congratulations on that.
We love that. Secretary, I know you don't want to get ahead of the Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of War here, but there are a lot of Americans who watch the big weekend show. Yeah. And every weekend we say tensions are rising. Now there's a memorandum. Now there's a ceasefire. Maybe it's not a ceasefire. We read some truth socials from the president. And there are some Americans who are a little confused as to where we are now. They don't know if their gas prices are going to go up or go down. What can you say to the American people who are watching? They believe in the president, but they're sometimes a little confused at all the steps and all the maneuvering going on.
Well, you know, the enemy has a vote, but yeah. Here's the thing, the president's always 5 steps ahead of him, and we could be the best friends in the world or the worst enemy. And look what's happening down in Venezuela. We're bringing aid and support to the people of Venezuela, and we're patrolling the seas all around the world, including South China Sea, as well as, you know, in Europe, the Mediterranean, the Gulf. We're there. We're there to do whatever the president
walked through the Jake Tapper CNN interview, the NATO name mix-up, and the AI attack video that started this specific 2026 chapter of hostilities. What follows here is what's happened since the sharpest health claims either side has made yet. The AI meme response, built on the exact same rhetorical structure, and the entirely new development of O'Donnell actually taking over a national broadcast desk for the first time in this entire 20-year conflict. None of it requires exaggeration to land. It's simply what's actually been reported over the past 2 weeks. Right now in U.S. politics. Before we get into the O'Donnell situation, here is where the country actually stands today. The Iran conflict remains genuinely unresolved as of August 9th. Tehran is not directly negotiating with Washington, but exchanging messages through intermediaries, with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi saying efforts are underway to create grounds for negotiations. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has set conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz, demanding an end to the U.S. blockade as a prerequisite, while the United States is simultaneously seeking Iranian commitments to stop attacks on ships passing through the strait, each side effectively asking the other to move first. Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthis claimed responsibility for an attack that caused a fire at a Saudi Aramco facility, the latest in a string of strikes that has kept the broader regional conflict from settling into any stable pattern. Hold that alongside the O'Donnell story, because it captures the same underlying pattern that keeps showing up across this entire presidency. A White House managing a genuinely unresolved 6-month-old regional war, exchanging messages through intermediaries over a critical global shipping lane, while the president finds time to personally design and post an AI-generated fake medical diagnosis of a comedian who criticized his health. Neither one crowds out the other. Both are happening in the same week, run by the same administration. Consider the specific sequencing here.
Was there, and he was there along with other top Navy people. We'll talk about what went down. And these family members confronted the head of our Navy and saying, you know, we know that our family members are suffering from serious mental health issues. They're unable to really even eat appropriate food to get basic nutrition. The showers are all moldy. The living conditions are rancid. The plumbing doesn't work. The toilets don't work. The basic day-to-day living has been awful. By the way, do you remember back several months ago on the Midas Touch Network, we were showing you the food that they were being served on the Abraham Lincoln and the Gerald Ford? Remember we were covering that, and it was like these pieces of meat, like just little tiny nuggets of meat that were hard to even decipher what it was. And then you had Hegseth and everybody in the Trump regime saying, no, that's not true. That's a lie. As though our sailors were lying to their family members. I mean, you had the Trump regime defaming our sailors who have been deployed for these massive periods of time. Remember early on, too, in the Gerald Ford, they had all that issue with the plumbing. The plumbing backed up and the sewage spilled. You had feces everywhere. And then on top of that, there was the fire from the laundry room, although some people believe it's possible that the USS Ford was struck by Iran. But the official story, I don't know, maybe even worse, that there was a laundry fire because just the basic nuts and bolts don't work in our Navy anymore under Hegseth and Trump and Hung Cao and all of these idiots.
And they were freaking out over Epstein, something that Donald Trump said was a hoax, something that he said.
As they should freak out about it, because when it gets released, and it will get released, he will be put in prison along with all the other men who have not been charged with one crime in the gross rape and torture of young girls and boys. And these women are now grown women, and no one is listening to them. And they keep threatening to release the names. They should be released yesterday. They should have already been released. Whatever you women know, stand up now and scream it, because no one is paying attention still. And he thinks he can get away with the fact that he went there 300 and something times. This
Incredible.
Man, people didn't believe that priests could be pedophiles. For a long time, no one believed a president, that couldn't be true. It's true. There's evidence and survivors. He's trying to hide it so he doesn't have to go to jail. Those are the facts, whether you like them or not.
30, 40 people overnight, and they're doing it on a daily basis. And before resuming talks with the U.S., the talks were supposed to take place in Switzerland. There currently right now is a Qatari delegation there with a Swiss delegation there, but no United States, no Iran, because that trip was canceled when Iran said, we're not going to go based on Israel further attacking Lebanon in violation of the MOU. Netanyahu vowed that Israel will stay in southern Lebanon as long as necessary. Israel continues its strikes. Israel officials believe that Trump has lost interest and Israel may need to act alone, and they don't care what Donald Trump says. And Israel National Security Minister Ben-Gvir calls for a massive escalation and says that all of Lebanon must burn. And then you had their finance minister Smotrich said we're going to unleash hell in Lebanon. And then Donald Trump is out there making weird social media posts of fish tanks on people's faces while he is spreading chemicals in the reflecting pool. As I noted, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said they're closing down the Strait of Hormuz. They put out the following message. Since Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon, the complete lifting of the naval blockade, and the withdrawal of American terrorist forces from the Persian Gulf and the region are among the main conditions of the MOU between Iran and the United States, the Strait of Hormuz remains closed until these conditions are met. All ships are requested for the sake of their security and safety do not approach the Strait of Hormuz. Any vessels that
Iran's
defies
demand
this
for an
directive
end to the blockade as a precondition for reopening Hormuz, and the American demand for an end to Iranian attacks on shipping before any blockade concessions describe a genuine standoff, two governments each waiting for the other to move first, with a critical global waterway sitting closed in the meantime. That is the kind of diplomatic impasse that occupies serious people's full attention for entire news cycles. It occupied evidently only part of this administration's attention during the same week that produced a custom AI-generated mock medical chart mocking a comedian's mental state. Both things are real. Both things happened. The question worth sitting with is what it says about this White House's priorities that both could occupy meaningful bandwidth during the exact same 72-hour stretch. Timeline. The August 4th podcast appearance wasn't O'Donnell's first health-related comment about Trump this year, but it was her most direct. Speaking with Kara Swisher, she didn't hedge. Trump was falling asleep, very physically ill, and doesn't look like he's long for this earth language, considerably blunter than her earlier public comments questioning his mental fitness. She went further than a simple physical assessment, arguing he shouldn't be the man in control of the nuclear codes, and when Swisher asked whether Trump might be losing support among his own base, O'Donnell agreed that people have died because of him and that people were waking up to what she characterized as his wrongdoing. She closed by urging Democrats to stand up to the administration, describing its conduct as evil, horrific, inhumane. It's worth being direct about the evidentiary status of the health claims, specifically since they're the most serious and the most checkable part of what she said. O'Donnell offered no medical records, no named source, and no specific diagnosis to support the claim that Trump is very physically ill. It was her own subjective read on his public appearance and behavior, not a reported medical fact. The White House, for its part, has not disclosed any undisclosed medical condition, and nothing in the public record independently corroborates the specific claim. That doesn't mean the underlying question concerns about an aging president's stamina and fitness for office, a question raised about presidents of both parties in recent election cycles, is illegitimate to raise. It means the specific, dramatic framing O'Donnell used went beyond anything she could actually document, and deserves to be treated as her personal assessment rather than an established fact. That distinction between a legitimate underlying question and an unsupported specific claim is worth dwelling on, because it applies to a broader category of commentary.
And it spread, and there was like 600 to 1,000 beds were destroyed. People had to sleep on the floor. And remember, it had to dock in Crete, like in Greece, to get fixed. And then the story came out how close it was for all of our sailors, like dying, like they almost all got killed. And then this was covered up. We were covering it right when it happened, that massive fire on the Gerald Ford. And so you had the Gerald Ford deployed for 326 days, which is unheard of. I mean, that's a post-Vietnam record. Now you have the Abraham Lincoln, 262 days or so. And the people, our sailors are suffering. And that's what their family members were saying. And they were saying that their family member sailors who were on these ships are saying, we don't want to be involved in these war crimes. We know that the Trump regime is killing the little girls in Manab. We don't want to be associated with these war crimes of Trump and Netanyahu. That's been a kind of consistent, and people were clapping in the room, and they were yelling at the top naval officers and the acting secretary of Navy. Then on Thursday night, there was also there was like a virtual meeting and virtual call as well. So there was the in-person call at the in-person meeting at the Island Club at that San Diego base. Then there was a virtual meeting And at the virtual meeting, you had, family members of the 5,000 or so service members, sailors. And so that's what the warning was from Dan Raising Cane. It was bigger than what's being reported in the New York Times, which is still big in and of itself. I mean, the headline from the New York Times, Trump holds off on major escalation against Iran as advisors raise concerns. Among the worries is that expanded hostilities could dangerously drain and diminish could dangerously drain the diminished stockpile of air defense munitions. It goes on to say how Dan Raising Cane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, told Donald Trump, look, we're alienating our Gulf allies right now already because we're showing that the U.S. security umbrella doesn't work and Iran's able to strike them with impunity right now, and their economies are suffering right now. I mean, look what you're doing to Saudi Arabia. Also, the Houthis hit those two major oil refineries, the Aramco oil refineries in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia was like, let's, maybe we could talk, maybe we can do a deal as well. You have the top military officials warning Trump about the shrinking inventory of Patriot interceptors and other air defenses, which I just laid out for you, the full nature and extent of that. And I may be downplaying some. There may be even more than what's been reported right there. Then before that, Jamie Raskin, Democratic Congressmember, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, he called out ICE and the Border Patrol Gestapo in perfect terms during a MAGA Republican hearing that was trying to, again, further divide the country and to just spew hate and vitriol against immigrants. Watch what Congressmember Jamie Raskin did here, how he turned the tables. Let's play this clip.
So why are our colleagues so desperate to keep pulling this boogeyman of the sanctuary jurisdictions out of the closet? Well, perhaps it has to do with the fact that they voted to give DHS more than $250 billion to improve immigration enforcement. And America has watched as the Department of Homeland Security has used this staggering pile of money to waste on luxurious private jets for the secretary, complete with bedrooms and bars, on overpriced and ultimately useless industrial warehouses to detain human beings that are now being sold off at a massive loss to the taxpayers, on a glitzy $220 million public relations horseback photo shoot and ad campaign for a glamorous Department of Homeland Security secretary who called the slain citizens Alex Preddy and Renee Good terrorists.
That's become common across this entire administration's various conflicts with celebrity critics. Questions about the stamina, alertness, and fitness of an aging president are a normal and recurring feature of American political commentary. They were raised about Joe Biden throughout his presidency, and they've been raised about other older office holders of both parties for decades. What separates a legitimate version of that question from an irresponsible one is usually the specificity and confidence of the claim being made. I think he seems tired is a subjective observation. He's very physically ill and doesn't look like he's long for this earth are considerably more specific. Alarming claims that imply access to information or at least a level of medical certainty that a podcast guest simply doesn't have. The people have died because of him comment deserves its own separate scrutiny, since it's a distinct claim from the health assessment and carries its own evidentiary weight. Depending on what specific policies or decisions O'Donnell had in mind, an ongoing war that has, by any accounting, produced real casualties is one plausible reading. The claim could describe something genuinely documentable, but delivered without specifying which deaths, which policy, or which causal chain she was referring to. The comment functions more as a broad rhetorical indictment than a specific, checkable factual assertion. And it's worth flagging that ambiguity rather than letting the claim's dramatic phrasing stand in for actual substantiation. Trump's response arrived on August 7th, 3 days later, and it followed a pattern that's become entirely predictable across this feud. Rather than directly rebutting the substance of her claim, he generated and posted an AI image mocking her instead. The meme placed O'Donnell in a mock medical exam room receiving a fabricated, Trump Derangement Syndrome Assessment, complete with a fake symptom list, irrational rage, obsessive Trump fixation, meltdown triggered by Trump news presented in the visual style of an actual clinical diagnosis. The move mirrors almost exactly the earlier AI attack video from this same feud that backfired on Trump weeks prior, suggesting that whatever backlash that first video generated did little to change his approach to responding to O'Donnell specifically. There's a specific irony worth naming in that response. O'Donnell's claim that Trump is very physically ill was unsupported speculation dressed up as fact. Trump's response, an AI-generated mock medical diagnosis claiming she suffers from a condition that isn't real, presented in the visual language of an actual clinical assessment, is the exact same rhetorical move, aimed back at her. Neither side produced anything resembling real medical evidence. Both sides used the visual and linguistic trappings of medical authority.
On the Abraham Lincoln, again, reiterating the horrific, putrid conditions. And then there was like this gimmick that the Navy tried to run, that the Trump regime ran. So the family members have very specific issues. Look, the showers don't work. The plumbing doesn't work. They're not getting the mail because the Fifth Fleet port in Bahrain has been destroyed by Iran. So our mail isn't even getting to them. And it's very hard for them to reach out to us. And when we do hear from them, we hear how horrible it is. And then the stunt that the Trump regime tried to pull at these meetings and in the virtual meetings, they were like, okay, we're going to text somebody aboard the ship right now. Oh, they say everything's fine and that what you're hearing from your family members is false. Can you believe that shit? Excuse my language. Can you believe? I mean, I guess you can because it's the Trump regime and they're absolutely horrific. And then what they're trying to dangle over these family members, they're like, well, we are getting ready. The USS Theodore Roosevelt, the USS Teddy Roosevelt, that carrier, we're preparing that. We can't tell you when that's going to replace the Abraham Lincoln, but we're working on it. We're working on it, okay? The earliest, by the way, would be December? So it seems like our sailors who are aboard that Abraham Lincoln supercarrier that's right out there, that's part of like the blockade, right? That's when they talk about the blockade, you get it, right? Right now, it's the George H.W. Bush and it's the Abraham Lincoln. And Hung Cao now says we need 350 more ships. That's why we are pushing for $1.5 trillion because Donald Trump wants to now build Trump-class battleships that'll cost close to $1 trillion when all is said and done. The budget total for the military Trump wants is $1.5 trillion. But in this day and age with drones, unmanned submersives, anti-drone technology, Trump wants to build battleships because he likes the aesthetic. He likes the way he doesn't like the way stealth looks. He doesn't like the way aircraft carriers looks, but he likes the way battleships look between World War I and World War II. So he wants to spend like $1 trillion on Trump battleships. This is where the money's going, by the way. In addition to it's why our debt is skyrocketing, and this could be going to like healthcare and things. This is what it's going to, and he can't even get food to our sailors in an active combat zone right now. So what the hell are you doing with your battleships? Here's what Hung Cao said. Here, play this clip.
Before, I mean, we fought 20 years of war, and the Navy was very involved, but it wasn't always the boats that we were thinking about. Now that's been the top line. We're in littoral warfare, brown water warfare, using ships in ways that maybe we haven't in the last couple of decades. Where is the Navy when it comes to fighting a war like this?
I mean, we're always ready. We're always on deployment all the time. But right now we need 350 ships. And that's exactly why the president is pushing for this $1.5 trillion budget so we can build the ships we need. Because ships like the USS Gerald Ford and the entire strike group was extended till 11 months on deployment because we didn't have enough ships to backfill them. And that's why we need these ships out there. But I tell you what, the strength of our Navy and Marine Corps is the sailors and Marines that are manning our ships and bases, and they're getting things done.
To make an unsupported claim about the other's mental or physical state look more credible than it actually was. It's worth being precise about one meaningful difference between the two, even while acknowledging the structural symmetry. O'Donnell's comment was delivered as a spoken opinion during a long-form podcast conversation, the kind of format where off-the-cuff, unhedged claims are common, and where a listener has some contextual signal that they're hearing one person's subjective read rather than a formal, prepared statement. Trump's response was a deliberately produced, custom-generated image designed and posted specifically for the purpose of visually mimicking a real diagnostic document. The production effort involved in generating a fake clinical assessment, choosing the visual template, writing the fabricated symptom list, formatting it to resemble an actual medical chart represents a meaningfully higher level of premeditation than an unscripted comment made in conversation. Both are unsupported. Only one of them required someone to sit down and deliberately construct a piece of fake medical documentation from scratch. It's also worth noting how quickly this specific exchange moved, start to finish. 3 days separated O'Donnell's podcast comment from Trump's AI meme response, a turnaround fast enough to suggest the White House, or Trump personally, was actively monitoring her media appearances closely enough to catch a podcast interview and generate a custom response within 72 hours. That speed is itself a data point about how much ongoing attention this 2-decade-old feud continues to command at the highest level of the executive branch, even as the war in Iran and the broader business of governing occupy the same calendar. The timing of all this matters more than it might first appear, because it lands directly ahead of O'Donnell's guest hosting stint on Jimmy Kimmel Live, scheduled for 4 consecutive nights beginning August 17th, while Kimmel takes a vacation, her first appearance on the show in any capacity. She's already signaled her approach publicly, saying she intends to be a good soldier for Kimmel and do what he's been doing so well for a week so he can have a nice vacation, and describing her plan to address Trump in a comedic, honest, truthful way. She's floated opening her first night with a comedic song imagining the president as a secret admirer, a considerably softer, more absurdist approach than the blunt health commentary that defined her August 4th podcast appearance. Not everything she's planned has made it to air, though. ABC blocked a planned parody rewrite of If I Only Had a Brain, the Wizard of Oz number aimed at Trump, citing licensing concerns specifically tied to the political content of her rewritten lyrics. That's a genuinely notable data point, because it means the network itself, not any outside pressure campaign, drew a line around what O'Donnell would be allowed to perform during her guest hosting week.
It used to be the Gerald Ford, but that was out 326 days. It had the fire, which almost killed all of our sailors. They had all the issues there. So now it's George H.W. Bush and Lincoln. So now they're saying, okay, well, the Lincoln may leave and it could be replaced by the Teddy Roosevelt, but the Teddy Roosevelt won't be ready. I think it's in Hawaii. I think so. That won't be ready at least until Christmas. So what, they're going to be out there for 400 days? I mean, they're going to be out there for the better part of a year. I mean, this is some sick stuff. I want to give a hat tip to MS Now. They got the scoop. They got the audio leaked to them from the family members who attended the in-person meeting at the Island Club at the San Diego base and the virtual meeting that also happened Thursday night. Can I read from you just a little bit of it? May I? Here's how it's described, and hat tip to MS Now for this scoop. In a combative face-to-face confrontation on Thursday night in San Diego, angry military families challenged the acting Secretary of Navy, Hung Cao, over difficult conditions aboard the USS Lincoln. Among the concerns brought up in this contentious meeting, there was that meeting, then the virtual meeting, the sailors' mental health, safety on deck, a lack of supplies, food shortages, water contamination, and disruptions in the mail system, which have caused many care packages en route to the ship to be lost in transit for months. The fact that family members aren't able to see their family and they've been gone so long. They've had Donald Trump also goes around comparing himself to historical rulers like Alexander the Great, Napoleon, Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, and that he's more powerful than them. Do you remember he posted 2 days ago? I showed you that post he made where he says, a great historian once told me, it was like a caddy Not a great historian, no offense to caddies, but Trump's like a great historian said it was some caddy who said that to him. That's who he attributes it to. And he said, Hitler, Mao, Stalin, Alexander the Great, I'm actually more powerful than I'm all. Really? You think so? Because at the same time, you have Pete Hegseth realizing that our Defense Department has run out of money. We need $80 billion or the Defense Department goes bankrupt. So he's rushed to Congress for an emergency funding because America is completely out of money. And as I noted before, Trump privately calls Howard Lutnick a pussy because Lutnick originally pushed back on Donald Trump's tariffs against the world. Donald Trump said, I remember when you were 35, you were a killer. Trump said, according to the book, and now you've got your beautiful wife and your big house and you're just soft and you're a pussy. You're a pussy, Lutnick. But after billions of dollars, Lutnick now says Lutnick flipped Trump's critique on him and would tell Trump that he was your $25 billion a month pussy or something. I mean, what's he even talking about? What are these people even saying right now? As I noted, there's currently a meeting, I guess, between Qatar and Switzerland taking place. I'm not sure that was the purpose of all of this. And Iran is saying, why do we even need to show up? The memorandum is signed. We can do discussions wherever. We don't want to show up to Switzerland. They want to be around the United. No one wants to be around this Trump regime.
On the exact same show whose regular host has weathered his own real documented suspension over unrelated political remarks within the past year. O'Donnell has said she was also asked not to reveal her guest bookings in advance, and that at least one planned guest children's educator, Miss Rachel, fell through, with O'Donnell indicating her approved lineup leans away from overtly political figures. That combination, a blocked political parody, a request to keep bookings under wraps, a guest list steering away from politics, paints a picture of a network exercising real, active editorial caution around O'Donnell's week specifically, even as she's publicly promising to address Trump in a comedic, honest, truthful way once she's actually behind the desk. Whether that caution reflects genuine legal concern over the specific Wizard of Oz licensing rights, or a broader institutional wariness about handing a guest host with 2 decades of documented Trump animus an open microphone for 4 consecutive nights, isn't fully resolved by the available reporting, but the tension between what O'Donnell has said she wants to do and what ABC has already blocked her from doing is itself worth watching closely once her week actually begins. The specific choice of If I Only Had a Brain as the blocked parody is worth pausing on, independent of the licensing rationale ABC cited publicly. The original song from The Wizard of Oz is sung by the Scarecrow, a character defined by his belief that he lacks intelligence, meaning a rewritten version aimed at Trump, would almost certainly have leaned into intelligence-based mockery, a well-worn line of attack in this feud and in the broader landscape of celebrity criticism of Trump this year. That ABC specifically flagged this particular piece, out of presumably several bits O'Donnell had prepared, suggests the network's concern may have centered as much on the specific content of that particular joke as on any general blanket policy against political material during her guest hosting week, though without seeing the full slate of material she proposed, that remains an inference rather than a confirmed fact. It's also worth situating the licensing explanation itself within some context. Parody and satire enjoy fairly broad legal protection under American copyright law, particularly political parody aimed at public figures, which courts have historically treated with considerable latitude. A network citing licensing issues as the reason for blocking a specific parody number is a plausible legal explanation, but it's also the kind of explanation that can function as a convenient, legally defensible way to avoid a more direct conversation about editorial discomfort with a specific piece of political content.
We must get back to the basics of professionalism. As iron sharpens iron, we need to hold each other accountable. This is the memo that was sent out. Our allies, adversaries, and the public can gauge our readiness within 10 seconds of an interaction. So we must strive to not only be the most lethal when preparing for comment, but also look the part every day. What's this weird obsession with they look the part? You know who doesn't look the part? You all. by saying, look the part. Y'all look like a bunch of phonies. And you know who can gauge our lack of professionalism in 10 seconds? Iran, our allies, our enemies, our adversaries. They can all do it, right? They all can see it. They all can see that you all lack professionalism. And how dare you attack our troops on the issue of professionalism? Children born and big life developments. You have lots of people, again, don't want to be associated with the war crimes that are taking place. And these are things that were raised to hung cow. 200 families attended in person, and there was many more on the virtual meeting. At times, spouses of sailors of the ships were in tears, asking the Navy leaders what was being done to address mental health issues, exhaustion. One parent said her daughter feels that she is never going to come home and believes she's going to die on the ship. One woman questioned the mission and said she found it difficult to be proud of her sailor when she believed the military was killing innocent civilians. And her sailor, her husband, who was a sailor on the Abraham Lincoln supercarrier, expressed guilt about what he was doing. Her comment was met with applause from the audience. You had Vice Admiral Joseph Cahill, Vice Admiral Douglas Verissimo, and top commanders for the naval surface forces were there, and they were just making the family members feel even worse about it. And they were like, oh, well, you know what? This is what it means to be an American. This is what it means to be a patriot. This is what Donald Trump and Hegseth want them to do, so they got to do what Trump and Hegseth say they need to do.
Which of the presidential candidates?
Senator, as I stated before, this is an issue that Justice Jackson and other nominees have been asked. They've not provided a response.
You understand why I'm asking you to state as a simple matter of fact who got more votes. The reason is that the president seeks to perpetuate a lie. You are, in effect, protecting the lie if you fail to take an independent position as a matter of simple fact. Everybody in this room knows the answer. You're unwilling to state it, instead adopting a script that's been dictated to you by the White House. You prepared this answer with the White House, did you not?
Senator, I prepared the answer based upon the response provided by Justice Jackson.
You consulted with the White House before you invoked Justice Jackson. That's the script, as you well know, that nominees sitting where you are right now have used again and again and again. Let me ask you, was the
Without the network having to say so explicitly. That's not an accusation that ABC is lying about its reasoning, only an observation that licensing concerns is a notably flexible justification, one that's difficult for outside observers to independently verify without seeing the actual rights negotiation that presumably took place behind the scenes. Reactions. Reaction to the August 4th health comments split along predictable lines, but with a specific factual wrinkle worth noting. Critics pointed out accurately that O'Donnell offered no actual evidence for her claims about Trump's physical condition. No medical source, no specific diagnosis, nothing beyond her own subjective read of his public appearance. That criticism has real merit on its own terms, independent of anyone's opinion of Trump generally. Serious claims about a sitting president's health deserve more than a talk show-style assertion to be treated as established fact. And O'Donnell's phrasing left little room for the kind of hedging that would have signaled she understood the difference between an opinion and a documented claim. Defenders of O'Donnell's comments generally didn't dispute that gap, so much as argue it cuts both ways, noting that Trump's own AI meme response made an equally unsupported claim about O'Donnell's mental state, dressed up in exactly the same pseudo-clinical visual language she'd been criticized for using. If one side's claim is disqualified for lacking evidence, they argued, the other side's response, built on the identical rhetorical structure, should face the same scrutiny rather than being treated as simple comedic mockery exempt from the standard applied to the original comment. There's a further wrinkle worth noting in how each side's supporters have handled the symmetry itself.
One spouse said they have a baby at home who was born during the USS Abraham Lincoln's deployment. My husband has gotten no time with her. We have friends that are on this boat as well. They've yet to meet their children. And I just think like a lot of us are kind of confused and just frustrated right now. We're in limbo. We have no date about when they're going to come home. And then those commanders were like, I wish we could help you, but there's really nothing we can do right now. There's also issues about exhaustion, low morale, mental health of the sailors and Marines as the war now reaches its 23rd week. Many in the virtual town hall question what mental health resources are available. The military leaders at this meeting acknowledged that there had been a stubborn clog that caused many of the toilets in a certain zone of the ship not to work for an extended period of time, but maintained that sailors on the ship had been trained to address the plumbing issues. By the way, in the USS Gerald Ford, the one that has departed in May. But remember all of those plumbing issues right around when the war was launched by Trump and Netanyahu? There was feces all over the floor. There was piss all over the floor and toilet water all over the floor. These supercarriers have not received the maintenance that they need under the Trump regime. It's really horrible stuff. Mold in the showers. It's not appealing for any of us. Difficult ventilation systems on the ship. Unique supply chain challenges taking place, which is causing food shortages because Iran has been striking those ports like Bahrain and other areas. This is what it says. Our nation relies on the Department of War to accomplish its mission of projecting power and deterring aggression. During my time serving as your undersecretary and now as acting secretary, I periodically observed departures from the expected high standards for our force or a lack of persistent vigilance. We must take a round turn in areas such as military bearing, physical fitness, and appearance, deportment, haircuts, and wear of the uniform, atrophy of the little things, erodes our heritage and undermines our trust. You're not even giving them food. You're not giving our sailors working showers. You're not giving them working toilets. You're not delivering their damn mail. And you've kept them out at sea. In the Gerald Ford example, 326 days. In the example of the Lincoln, 262 days. How dare you attack their professionalism? You want to see Donald Trump at night doing drone port posts and AI images of himself with General MacArthur and Patton? And then you want to lecture about professionalism? No, our service members are damn professional. It's all of you in leadership who behave like buffoons.
Pretending to fight for freedom and democracy abroad.
Critics of Trump have generally been quick to point out that his meme uses the same discredited rhetorical structure as O'Donnell's claim, while defenders of Trump have tended to treat his response as obviously satirical and therefore exempt from the same fact-based scrutiny applied to O'Donnell's more earnest-sounding podcast comment. That distinction, earnest claim versus satirical meme, has some real basis. Format and tone do matter for how an audience is meant to receive a piece of content. But it's also worth noting that the meme's fabricated symptom list was presented with enough visual seriousness that it circulated widely as though it were making a genuine diagnostic claim, blurring the line between obviously a joke and a real accusation dressed in joke's clothing, in ways that made the format distinction considerably less clean in practice than it is in theory. The upcoming Kimmel guest hosting week has generated its own distinct, forward-looking commentary, separate from the health claims exchange entirely. Entertainment commentators have noted the structural oddity of the situation, a network blocking a specific piece of political content from a guest host, while that same guest host publicly signals her intent to address the president in some comedic form regardless. On a program whose regular host has already weathered a real 6-day suspension over unrelated political material within the past year. Some have read ABC's caution as a lesson learned from that earlier suspension, applied preemptively this time rather than reactively. Others have suggested the blocked parody may generate more attention for O'Donnell's week than the parody itself would have, simply by becoming its own pre-show controversy before she's even sat down in the chair. There's also a meaningful split in how commentators have read O'Donnell's own stated approach to the week. Her promise to be a good soldier for Kimmel and to keep things comedic, honest, truthful, reads, on its face, like a deliberately moderated tone compared to the blunt, unhedged language she used just weeks earlier, calling Trump very physically ill on a podcast. Some observers have taken that shift at face value, suggesting O'Donnell understands the difference between a long-form podcast conversation and a mainstream network broadcast audience, and is calibrating her material accordingly. Others remain skeptical that the softer framing will hold once she's actually live on air for 4 consecutive nights, pointing to 2 decades of prior evidence suggesting O'Donnell's comedic instincts tend toward directness rather than restraint.
So we can't get the food from the Fifth Fleet port onto the ships. And because our ships are sitting ducks out there and just doing the blockade, as Trump calls it, there's no way to get them. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The Red Sea is closed, right? That's why the George H.W. Bush had to go around Africa. So that's why you can't get food to the ships, because we don't have control over anything, because Iran won the war. Like, we all get that, right? There was this huge backlog of food. So you have all of that taking place, okay? I showed you the photos going back to the issues with the Gerald Ford. I showed you the food issues, right, with the Abraham Lincoln. I mean, look at that. I don't even know what this is. And then our military had the audacity to say, no, that's not a real photo. Those are lies. Like, what, our sailors are liars? No, they're telling the truth. What are you talking about? Then there was the laundry room fire that required basically our service members to sleep on the floor. They all lost it. But even worse than the fact that they didn't have beds, they don't have sheets, it all got burned. You saw the footage that our military was trying to cover up, right? I think we have the footage that came in from foreign governments had to post it. Like this came in from Russia and other places, but it's authentic, this photo. I wouldn't show you videos that aren't authentic. This is what it looked like, just so you can see. I know, it's absolutely horrific, right? Absolutely. And then on Wednesday, before this meeting took place, Hung Kao released the following memo. I kid you not, this is real. Acting Secretary of the Navy's warrior ethos. This went to all Navy. Everybody got this in the Navy. The bedrock of the Navy and Marine Corps is our warrior ethos, and its direct relationship to good order and discipline forge these principles into the foundation of our lethality as a naval force. What the hell word salad does that even mean? We must recognize the urgency for an immediate reevaluation of our attention to basic military standards, appearance, and professionalism across the department. So Hegseth, Hung Kao, and Trump are now attacking our sailors and saying that they don't meet the basic standards and professionalism. Actually, they do. How dare you say that about our service members? You want to talk about basic professionalism? How about you get our service members food? How about you get them functioning toilets and functioning showers? How about you deliver their damn mail, you traitors? What the hell are you talking about? How about we start with getting food in their tummies? Like, how about we start with the basics, okay? And how about we have toilets that don't explode on these ships, okay?
Once she's got an actual audience in front of her. The love song tease specifically has drawn its own lighter strand of commentary, with some entertainment writers noting that the secret admirer framing, casting Trump as covertly infatuated with her rather than simply hostile, inverts the usual dynamic of this feud in a way that's arguably more clever than a direct attack would. B. Rather than escalating the health claims or the insult trading, that specific bit reframes 2 decades of mutual public obsession as something closer to an absurdist romantic comedy premise, which several commentators noted might land as genuinely funny with a broad audience in a way that a more direct, angrier bit risks not achieving. Closing take. What distinguishes this chapter of the O'Donnell-Trump feud from the ones before it is the platform shift about to happen. For nearly 20 years, this has been a fight conducted primarily through interviews, talk show commentary, and social media posts, each side speaking from their own separate platform past each other, rather than through any shared broadcast moment. Starting August 17th, that changes, at least temporarily. O'Donnell will have Kimmel's actual desk, Kimmel's actual audience, and 4 consecutive nights to say whatever ABC's editorial line allows her to say about a president she's now spent 2 decades criticizing in increasingly personal terms. The August 4th and August 7th exchange is worth remembering as the immediate backdrop to that moment, precisely because it shows neither side has moved toward more careful, evidence-based criticism as the stakes have risen. O'Donnell's claim about Trump's health was unsupported. Trump's AI-generated response, built on the same unsupported diagnosis structure, was no more grounded in anything real. 2 decades into this fight, both participants are still reaching for the same basic move. Dress up an unverifiable claim about the other person's mental or physical state in language that sounds clinical, and let the audience decide how seriously to take it. That pattern makes the ABC parody restriction more interesting than it might otherwise seem. A network that has already watched this exact kind of unsupported personal mockery escalate for weeks at a time chose, in this specific instance, to draw an editorial line before O'Donnell even got behind the microphone.
Now, a few points I want to bring up right now. You had Pete Hegseth. What is he repeatedly saying about how he's going to improve morale? He goes, those flyovers that we're doing, when we fly our planes really low, how like they do like those jets that fly right over the water and looks like they're going to kill the people on the beach, which they go, yeah, lethality. That's what Pete Hegseth, we're going to keep doing the flyovers until we improve morale. Here, play this clip.
The warrior ethos of our department, again, spirit. And I will know the flyovers will indeed continue until morale improves. But that's also spirit. Parades, 250, flyovers, the American people seeing and feeling their military in ways they have not in the past. That's spirit.
And then you have Hung Cao, who has the acting Secretary of Navy, who says, the president is always 5 steps ahead of the Iranians. No, you can't even get our sailors food. The toilet bowls are clogged with feces, and there's feces all over the floor. Our sailors are suffering because you can't even give them the most basic supplies. There's mold, the showers don't work. So if you can't do the basics, right? This is, I kid you not, this is the message. They're attacking our troops. With everything going on, they're blaming our troops right now. Trump, Hegseth, Hung Cao. Well, how else would you read this? The services must prioritize warfighters remaining physically and mentally fit, and shall do so by allotting the time and resources for them to train accordingly. Navy and Marine Corps culture will drive the success of this outcome, because it is the essence of how we fight, win, and accomplish impossible tasks. To build culture, it starts with physical appearance and personal comportment every single day. A squared-away Marine exudes discipline, preparedness, and lethality. A squared-away sailor displays confidence, focus, and precision. Service culture is where it starts. This includes how we act online or on social media. Effective immediately, every sailor and Marine shall ensure their every action aligns towards these behaviors. We are in the business of war fighting, and we must get at this with urgency. You see what the veiled threat is right there? Don't post about how horrible we're treating you, because that would be unprofessional. And you would not be showing the warrior ethos and lethality by telling your family members that you are suffering aboard these carriers. How else would you read that?
Not over the health claims, which the network had no direct role in, but over a specific piece of scripted content it could actually control in advance. Whether that caution holds up once O'Donnell is actually on air for 4 consecutive nights, promising comedy that's honest and truthful about a man she just told a podcast audience doesn't look like he's long for this earth. Is very much still an open question one. This feud, 20 years in, has never given anyone much reason to expect will resolve quietly. There is a broader point worth drawing out of this specific moment in the feud, one that applies to nearly every other conflict, chronicled between this administration and its entertainment world critics this year. 20 years is an unusually long time for any two public figures to keep returning to the same fight. And the fact that it's still generating fresh material, a new podcast interview, a new AI meme, a new network policy decision suggests something durable about the underlying dynamic, rather than a feud that's simply running on inertia. Trump keeps responding to O'Donnell rather than ignoring her, and O'Donnell keeps escalating rather than letting old material stand. Neither side has shown any sign across 2 decades of simply deciding the fight isn't worth continuing. Durability is itself worth sitting with as this next chapter begins. Most celebrity feuds this administration has generated over the past year have followed a familiar arc. An initial flashpoint, a wave of coverage, a gradual fade as the news cycle moves elsewhere. The O'Donnell conflict doesn't follow that pattern. It resets, escalates, and resets again on a schedule measured in years rather than news cycles, with each new chapter finding some fresh way to restate the same underlying hostility in a slightly different format. A Truth Social post, a cable news interview, a podcast appearance, an AI-generated meme, and now, for the first time, an actual national television desk. Whatever happens during O'Donnell's 4 nights behind Kimmel's chair, it will not be the first time this specific fight has found a new stage. Based on the last 20 years, there is little reason to expect it will be the last.